everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Energy Works, our last episode of our first year of podcasting. And we're really excited to. Last week, we talked about reflecting on the year past. And this week, we're going to talk about reflecting on the year to come and how each of us do that. And it's funny that I just said this is the last podcast that we did because that's one of the things that we have reflected on together, how this has gone, how it's landed, how it's received, how we feel about it. We're actually going to do some podcasts at the start of next year about how we both feel about this podcast because it's brought up some emotions for both of us that were unexpected. So we're going to talk about that and sort that out with all of you. And then how we look forward. So I'm just going to start. I shared last week about how I like to lie down in the snow and just sort of let the year flow by me and let myself experience it again in my mind's eye. And I sort of take mental notes about how it went and what I liked and what I didn't like. And then even as I'm doing that, I start to think, which of these threads do I want to pull forward into the next year's tapestry? And so even though maybe I haven't yet started to use the metric that Blaine shared, there's this still internal feeling sense of this is the project that's going to bring me joy, that I'm excited about. You can feel that emotion. And so that's an easy one to pull forward. This is one that I know I have to complete. And so my willpower gets really fired up on that. Even though I might not feel as much joy, there's this other emotion of completion of a work project or something that I want to do. So there's like those ideas that as I'm reflecting, I'm also thinking, what am I done with? What am I ready to just like shake my hands? I'm complete with that. I'm good. Whether it is completed or not, there's times where I'm just like, I'm done. I'm out. Whether that means I'm out on Gen 1 or it's like I'm, withdrawing from this text message thread. If you're on like one of those crazy texts, you're like, I'm done with that or whatever. I've just taken a long break from scrolling through the news. And do I pull that forward into the next year or am I? So this is the junction point where now I look at all those threads and I kind of synthesize and I figure out what are the ones that have to come forward because it's a project that's ongoing and multi-year or something. And then what are the ones that I'm really excited? And then are there new things that I'm excited to do? Like what project have I been putting off or something that doesn't have to be a project that I've been putting off because I don't think I have the time or emotional energy or physical energy to do it. So what new thing do I want to embark on? So I've got all of those things swirling. And then at some point, when all that swirl kind of quiets down, I like to get really, really quiet and still. So that's sort of like the chitta vritti of the meditation. It's like I let everything flow. I let everybody talk. Every idea gets its time and space and it gets to go as long as it wants and sees all the way through. I mean, sometimes I have ideas that come through from like beginning to like the logo is drawn in my head, and I've got the LLC already. Like it's that baked already fully just in my head. So I'll let those ideas just flow around for as long as they want to, all the new ones, all the exciting ones, all the drudgery ones, all the things that I'm going to do. And then I let myself, after these all percolated and bubbled up, silence, stillness, quiet for a really long time. And what I'm waiting for then is I ask for a theme. Usually it's one word. Now my psyche knows that because I've done this now. My psyche knows what's coming, but I don't know what it is. And so I just get as quiet and still as like the deepest underground lake or something. And I wait. And I've asked for it. And then it will come up. This word will bubble up. That's like, this is my theme for the coming year. And then I kind of use that word as my umbrella that really holds the context of everything that's going to come forward for the next cycle, the next big cycle, the next annual cycle. So we'll talk more about that, but go ahead, Blaine. What do you do?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm already kind of laughing because mine is different. It's, I guess, more metal. And I love this. Let me say this. I do have a planner that it's not a calendar or a schedule. It is a planner that facilitates this process. And I get excited about doing this every year. Like it really stokes me up. And I've done years where I get like buy all these stickers and I have like my stickers and my colored pens and the highlighter and all this kind of stuff. I don't do the stickers and the colors and all that as much lately. I doubt I will this year, but it is a situation that I get really excited about. And so we talked last week about how I go through everything that I've been doing so far. So it's not new stuff. And then I decide some things are going to go if I've decided that that's something that is not giving me energy or maybe even is energy neutral. I do use the excuse of January 1st to call somebody up and be like, hey, I'm making some changes in the next year and this isn't working out anymore, or this has run its course, or and like however I'm gonna say it, because I have to release some things to make room for what is new. Like that is the only way that it works. But I say it kindly, and then I like to think that the person on the other side is relieved and that they're just glad that I was the person who had the courage to say it first, or something like that, and that I'm actually doing us both a favor. And I don't know, it's rare that I get very angsty about it or anything like that. It's always done with love and good intention. And so then as I'm looking now, I've cut some stuff loose, and there's so many things. I have more things I want to do than I have time in a year. And so through journaling and meditation, I cull out the things that I think are realistic, because I don't want to set myself up for too much and stress and failure and all that sort of thing. So the things that I can realistically do given my other responsibilities and my job and all those sorts of things that I want to take on. And then I look at it from the year view, the quarter view, the month view, and start to plan out what I am going to do when. And like I said, I have a calendar that facilitates this. And so I plan it out. And then I know, Lauren, we're going to talk about this as, it's little mini reflections as the year goes on. If it's something I'm still energized about, or, needs to like move, or, that sort of thing. And so it's quite a, like I said, it's a planner. It's not necessarily a calendar. And so the planner does have, months and quarters and that sort of thing. But, it's not like May 1st, May 2nd, May 3rd. It's a little bit more at a higher level of what you want to do when. But like I said, I have a ton of energy around doing it. I really love the sitting down and planning. I think it's fun. And I like lists and I like organized. And so I really like this getting it out of my head and onto paper. But then again, it sets me up for a situation that I have to do reality check, because life's, right? Life is going to happen. Life is going to life. And so there's no way that everything I do in this exercise is actually going to happen the way that I wrote it down.
It sounds really fun. I like that. I like doing, I'm a huge calendar person too. I love a calendar. I like a physical calendar, not the phone one. And I like to write everything out too and sort of look at the whole year of the big picture things. I don't do so much of that with the the mentoring things and the sort of smaller things that kind of fill in the blanks. But the big picture things, like, this coming year, we're launching a really big final course. And so that's taking a lot of energy, and that plugs in a bunch of things. And so I like doing that too. And just seeing, what retreats are coming. I usually start with what my work life looks like, because that determines where everything else flows. Because some of those things are, sort of non-negotiable in terms of the scheduling of things. But I love that idea of doing all of it. It is really fun. And I love how much passion you have around it. It's awesome.
It is. It's so fun. And then, those of you who know me personally probably already know I do keep a digital calendar. Like my schedule is actually an electronic schedule in a Google Calendar. And so I have this paper planner, which is, the higher level goals stuff. But the actual, like, if I'm going to write a book and I have to write 2 hours a day to get a book done, like the planner is where you're going to see from like this time to this time, work on book, from this time to this time, do that. And so I don't do that in this like paper sort of thing. That part is on the digital calendar. But I think it's important to mention that because that's how it happens, right? Like it doesn't happen because I wrote it down on this like planner. Like it actually ends up happening because I put time in my calendar to do the things that I need to do. And so some of my goals are athletic. I like to run. I like to, I do different forms of triathlon or duathlon or running. So there's different types of races. There's different distances. There's the road. There's the mountain. There's all kinds of different ways you can do this. And I challenge myself in different ways. And so I might write down that I want to do a Olympic distance duathlon. But then in order for me to do an Olympic distance duathlon, I have to do a certain amount of running and biking. And so like every day, my time that I run or that I bike to get to the duathlon to the month that I want to do it, that part goes on my calendar. Or like Lauren said, the business, we have this massive course coming up. And actually, we have a lot of cool things planned for 2025. And so I can write those down on paper and make sure that I haven't put too many things, to actually, I won't have time to get my work done on paper. But then, my day by day, hour by hour, what are all the steps I have to do to get there happen in my digital calendar. That might have been a little too much information, but that's the nuts and bolts of how it works for me, a metal element.
I am now laughing because we're going to have to do many more podcasts on elements and your own personal element and how that works for you. I'm laughing because I'm thinking to myself, how do I personally get anything done in my life? Because there's nothing that I do that comes even close to that kind of level of organization of time. And like I've written and published 3 books and now I'm like, how did I do that? Because I never wrote like, I will be writing this much today, or I will, like I am such a water in terms of that. It's just like, oh, I guess today, well, let's see. Like every day, it's like I'm a goldfish. Every day is a new day. What are we doing today? There's no 2 days of my life that are exactly the same or that are scripted out or, so I love that you do that. And you're like, if it's on the planner, that doesn't mean it's going to get done. It's got to go onto the calendar. And for me, if it's on the planner, somehow it will happen. And it seems to. I don't know how, but by the end of the year, there's another book I wrote. I have not writing a book this year. I'm just letting you all know. But you know what I mean? Like this happened. I said this was going to, or sometimes it doesn't even get written down on the big planner, but I've got this idea or this passion and I'm going to follow it. And months later, I'm like, wow, I did that. Cool. It wasn't written down anywhere. So I just am laughing. Like, how do I get anything done without that level of precision with your time? Again, this is like an elemental thing, how each of us is so different. We all live our lives and accomplish the goals in our lives in very, very different ways. And so again, I'd love for you all to drop in the chat, like, what do you do to ensure that your goals or your resolutions become manifest? And maybe now we can talk for a moment about that reflective process. because we can start the year with, all these goals. We're going to do this, and, all of these different areas. These are my personal goals. These are my sports goals and my professional goals. These are my relationship goals. These are my, diet and nutrition goals. These are my political goals or my global giving back goals, right? I probably missed 10, areas. So then we get into the year and we get into the day by day, and you're like, oh my God, this is so dragging me down. Or, oh, I can't believe I have to do that. Why did I sign up for that? Like, have you ever had that experience where you're like, oh, I told them I would do this and now I really don't want to, but I said I would. So there's all of that back and forth in your head. And now I'm not doing the thing I really wanted to do. I'm overwhelmed. I have too much to do. And then flick, 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 flick goes all your New Year's resolutions. And then, especially the ones that you were really determined to make, which by the, I think if we looked at, polls or something like that, like most people, the New Year's resolution, there's so many about diet or alcohol or drug use, right? That people want to minimize, or, like big, intense, difficult goals without really taking into consideration maybe all of the reasons around why those things are in your life in the first place, because we don't really do that so much at New Year's. They're just like, I'm stopping sugar January 1. That includes all alcohol, and not looking back of like, well, have I been using sugar to self-soothe, and what is it that I'm trying to self-soothe, and maybe I should look at what that is and then resolve that, and then the sugar will fall away. But we don't really do that. We're just like, sugar's done, alcohol's done, and you're like, why am I so angry about everything, and why is everything so difficult? And so we want to take time to review these choices that we've made and not be so committed to our commitment. And I don't want that to sound the wrong way, but to just that, like, I said I'm going to do it, so I'm going to do it, hell or high water, do or die. But really, is that the best way to go about these changes that you want to bring in your life, whether taking out things or adding things in? To just say that you're going to do it and then nothing is going to stop you from that path, or it didn't work day one, I'm throwing it out, and then nothing's going to keep you on that path. Instead, can there be some self-reflection? And both of us use that idea of not just an annual self-reflection like we just talked about last week, but checking in with yourself more periodically. So I think both of us do this, and this is a very yogic thing, is you check in on the new moon. This is the time for new beginnings, and you just sort of check in. So how do I need to start a new thing, a new project, or I'm reflecting back on how my last month went. And then we check in on the quarter points as well, the equinoxes and the solstices, which is very earth element time. It's about really grounding into who you are. And so that point happens between the changes of the season. So you get an opportunity to look at, okay, how did that last season go, that last 4 months go, and what adjustments do I need to make going into this new season? Because even if you've got a through line of, for you, Blaine, like you're training for this Olympics, but your training in the winter is different than your training in the spring, is different than your training in the summer, is different than your training 2 weeks before the event, right? So you're always reflecting back, and it's always a feedback loop. How does this work? Good, keep going. Bad, shift. Good, keep going. Bad, shift, right? So that you've got this kind of a really granular presence with your life, and not just like, this is what I'm doing, but like the ability to shift in the moment, to be responsive to that feedback loop. And so I'll leave it there and turn it back to you. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's this unmeasurable balance, balance not being equal, this flow of everything that's happening at any given moment that is weighing in on this. And I feel that it's this masculine energy and feminine energy. We can call it yang energy and yin energy. And there's different words that are similar, but it's quite, or the container versus the flow. That it's very masculine, to use that term. This isn't gender, just the energy, to Be like, I said I'm going to do it. I wrote it down. Come hell or high water, I'm doing it. Nothing's changing, right? And then on the other side, it's feminine. Again, the energy, not the gender, to be like, oh, like, but I have this new idea now. Like, I don't even care about that old idea anymore. That's yesterday. Like, now I want to do this. And so let it go, right? And move on to this other thing. And then, but most of the time it's somewhere in the middle. You have to decide, is this something I committed to doing it and I'm going to follow through? Or is it something that's like, I'm not in the mood for that anymore, or it doesn't interest me anymore, or the energy has changed and this is now important to me and this is not important to me anymore. And so I'm going to let that commitment go and I'm going to go do this instead. And it's never any one answer because we're all different. The energy is changing. I think as a energy medicine yoga leader and as a coach and as someone who accepts money from people to give them classes, courses, one-on-ones, whatever it is I do, if I've accepted money and made a commitment to do something, I feel very strongly that I'm going to sit in that container of masculine energy and follow through on what I committed to because it affects other people. Versus if it's something I was just kind of a creative project I was doing on my own and my decision to drop it or not doesn't necessarily affect anybody else, I think about it differently. And that's just one example. There's a million layers of complexity of the right thing to do. Because the right thing to do 100% could be drop it like a ton of bricks and move on to something else. Or the right thing to do might really be follow through on what you said you were going to do for a bazillion different reasons. And so that's this reflection, be it, every day, every minute, every new moon, every quarter point, when it's up in your face and you got to deal with it right then, whatever that is. But what I think what's important from the energy perspective is allowing all possibilities. And can you, instead of, prejudging, can you tune in to the energy of the moment, the demands of the moment, the situation, everything that's going on, consider all possibilities, and then come to the one that you believe is most right. And I think these reflection points that you put in, obviously emergencies happen and you have to decide things right at the moment. But when when you have more of a normal flow, I would say these checkpoints, it's good to actually go through this because it requires presence. And so you can thoughtfully make these decisions to continue with something or not, instead of other things making that decision for you. Do you look at it that way, Lauren?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast with Liz Gilbert not that long ago, and she talked about a similar thing where if you've got to look at why you want to drop a project and see if you have a history of starting and dropping things, then when the hit to drop it comes up, you need to look at that and see what that is. Versus if you have a history of following through and manifesting things, and then you're in the middle of a project and you're like, I think I'm going to drop this. That's a different energy of that you're coming to it. Like you've completed many things, and this one you're feeling you just don't want to, for whatever reasons are coming up for you. Versus like, oh, I just don't feel like doing this anymore. Now I'm going to do that. That's the better idea, right? But you've never really followed through to know what that feeling of completion, because every project, no matter how amazing and inspired and incredible it is, every single project has the part of it that is like drudgery and annoying and like difficult and not fun anymore, and you're like, why am I doing this? And so you've got to have that the will, the strength, the energy to see yourself through those challenging parts by that overall sense that this is the right project to do versus just when it gets tough, I'm out, right? So you've got to be able to sort of track yourself with, are you a completer? Do you complete things? Do you complete projects? And, or are you, I used to call myself a dilettante, right? Because I would be into a little thing for a little while and then I'd flit off into something else. And I'd do that for a little while and I'd flit off into something else. It was like jack of all trades, master of none, right? And so you don't get a lot completed then. You don't make forward motion. There's that story that they say, if you're digging for a well, you don't dig 100 shallow holes in the yard, right? You dig one hole really deeply until you hit the water. And so that's, I think, a part of the reflection. And another piece that I'm really, I think we're going to have to do a series of podcasts about this because you've talked about it now today and last time as well. But I feel like it would be really valuable and powerful to share with people. It's not just a mental construct of like, this is what I want to do and this is what I'm going to do. And then, oh, I failed to do that. Oh, like I fell off the wagon or whatever that wagon is. But there's an energy underneath all of that, an energy that propels you and helps you and supports you to continue through the projects that you're going to do. And when you talked about that little checklist that you do, you sort of touched on that. It's like, does this bring you energy? Does it give you more energy, or does it give you less energy, or is it sort of neutral? And so I think it would be valuable maybe sooner than later. Maybe we'll, do this sooner than later to share with everybody the energetic ways of getting to that knowledge. And truly, it's more wisdom than knowledge because it's the wisdom of the body that is telling you, so that you don't need to default to the, like, do I want to do this? Do I not? Maybe today you don't want to do it, but, like all of those thoughts in the head that just, again, the chitta-vrittis of like what I'm going to do, and no, I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do it if they tell me to do that, and no one's going to make me quit. Like all of those things, right? It's like there is a deeper, quieter, more powerful wisdom of the body that can really support you in these choices and these decisions that you make of how to use your time. Because we have, one of the other things that these reflective times of year and the turning of the page show us the movement of time. Time is moving forward. It is a one-way arrow. Even though we go back and forth in time all the time, our lives are moving forward in a one direction trajectory. And so part of that reflection and then looking forward, especially the reason we do it this time of year, the metal time of year moving into the water time of year. Metal is about endings. Water is about beginnings. So we're turning that page. Metal is about gathering the wisdom, and water is about the field of all possibilities. And so it's this time where we look at the preciousness of our lives and our days and of our hours, and what is it that we want to do? What is going to support us on our path the most effectively, the most powerfully, the most, we want to be able to ultimately, this reflection may take, hopefully, if we're lucky, will take place on our deathbed. And we will reflect back on our lives and be at peace. And so, some of these longevity practitioners teach, if you want to be able to do something at 100, like say, Blaine, you want to be able to run a marathon at 100 years old, here are all the things you need to do now so that when you're 100, you will be able to run that marathon. And so if the goal is to be on your deathbed and be at peace and feel content with the contents of your life, you need to be doing that all along the way. And especially the emotional pieces, because at the end of your life, there's not a lot of people that are on their deathbed thinking, I wish I made more money. I really wish I had another $1 million in the bank right now because I'm about to die and that would be really helpful. No, that's not what people are thinking. They're like, I wish I had reconnected with my long lost sister, or I wish I had, healed that relationship with myself. I wish I had loved myself more. I wish I wasn't so hard on myself. Okay, so extrapolate back and start that now. Start that now. That self reflection, that feedback loop of contentment and of peace and of joy, and let that be the through line that guides you to the decisions and choices of how you're going to use every hour of your day for the projects that you want to accomplish.
Lauren, that was so beautiful. I don't really have anything to add. I feel like maybe one thing to touch on before we wrap is this, because I think you touched on it without saying the word, this trust, right? The trusting yourself. And I do think back to the Liz Gilbert conversation that you listened to, when you're just like, okay, I have a commitment. Okay, I don't want to do that anymore. I have a commitment. I don't want to do that anymore. I have it, then you do lose some trust in yourself. Because every time you make a commitment to yourself and you let yourself down, and make a commitment to yourself and let yourself down, it's harder to believe in your own commitments to yourself, and easier to let yourself down. And back, to this energy that I do think we should talk about it more, because it's we don't want to make this too long of a podcast or get too, off where we are kind of at the end of the year and the energy that we're talking about here. But I think that ties into the energy you're talking about, the energy that is putting all of this together for you and supporting you and conspiring to support you because you wouldn't have the idea if it wasn't possible, right? It just would never have entered your head. So the energy, without a doubt, is there. But the trusting in it and trusting in yourself, I think, is another big part of this, because like you said, the chitta vritti, the mind can tell us a whole bunch of other stories that are otherwise. But I think what you just said, Lauren, is incredibly beautiful and potent.
I want to add something on, because you brought a really powerful piece in that one about trust. And especially at this time of year, when we go in and there is that field of New Year's resolutions, like we can't deny that like everyone's talking about it, and it's in the top 10 this and da 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 that and all that. What's your resolution? And what you said is so potent, because when you do that, when you make a vow or commitment to yourself, and a resolution is just that same kind of feeling, and it holds that same kind of energy, and then you don't follow through, like what you talked about, it creates like a schism, an internal schism, that you can't trust yourself to do what you say that you're going to do. And while that might not sound like a huge thing, energetically, it's actually a very huge thing. It's a very big thing for you energetically, because it becomes a lie that you're telling yourself. And then your own body, mind, spirit starts to distrust, like the captain of the ship or the ego of the ship that's like, I'm going to quit sugar. Right. And then 2 days later, someone brings brownies to the office and you're like, oh, okay, one little piece won't matter. Okay, so you just had a divide inside, internally, energetically, from I'm going to do this, now I'm not going to do this. And essentially you lied to yourself. And so that's a really important thing. So as we're going into this season of making these resolutions, can you be a little gentler and a little more honest with yourself? So, not to say that you're not going to set goals for yourself, because I think that's a really powerful and positive thing to do, but to also acknowledge the challenges, to bring support to yourself so that you can stay in integrity with yourself. even when you then are going to, like in this example, if you're going to fall off that sugar wagon and you're going to eat that brownie anyway, how can you do that in a way that stays in integrity with yourself, the self that is trying to not eat sugar anymore? And there's an energy that can support that, that we're going to share with you, and ways for you to feel nurtured and supported in your choices. And I'm pausing here, and I'm going to kick it back to you now that I opened up a can of worms, because how can we? I want to like end this in a really positive note, but I also do think it's important for us to recognize the times when. And I've done it so many times, and it took for a friend of mine to say to me, you know, you're lying to yourself. Why are you lying to yourself? Just don't say that you're not going to do that anymore if you're going to keep doing that. I get that you want to stop doing that behavior, but you haven't stopped doing that behavior. A part of you wants to stop, but a part of you doesn't want to stop. And so you're creating this divide within yourself between those two parts. And we could do a whole episode on parts work as well, for those of you who know that, internal family systems, right? There's parts of you that want to do things and parts of you that don't want to do things. So how do you get them together so that you don't have that schism and that, you know, that inability to trust yourself? So I just unwrapped a spider's nest, and now I'm going to pass it off to you, Blaine.
Well, I'm definitely not going to get into IFS right now because that's a whole other thing. But I guess for a simple answer is don't overcommit, and maybe, don't commit to much. I think listeners, if you're the person who maybe has lost some trust in yourself, or if not, right? I mean, you know this. And so if you're a person who has lost some trust in yourself, try to select something if you are going through some sort of intention setting at this time of year. You have to rebuild the trust. And so go small and not too many things, because you can rebuild the trust on tiny little steps. A small thing that you can do, follow through. A small thing that you can do, follow through. And then maybe a little bigger thing. And so stepping back up, I think is the way to go. Pick little thing. I'm going to fold my clothes when they come out of the laundry every time and get them in the drawer, I mean, something that you can really do where maybe there's not some addiction or some crutches or some self, you know what I mean? Just things that are easier, because you 100% can rebuild the trust. And so really focus on setting yourself up for success.
I love that so much. And one of the reasons I love that so much is because it really speaks to us of the power and the need of community, because it is together that we learn from each other. We learn tools and tactics to be able to grow on our own paths together. And it also teaches us that we're not alone. And so when you get to a place where you feel like, oh, I just opened up a spider's nest of weirdness in my brain, what do I do with that? You pass it to your buddy, and she unpacks it in a way that gives you back a gem, and you're like, oh, right. You can rebuild your trust, tiny steps, baby steps, and it's all there for you. And so thank you for that double teaching, Blaine, of how we move forward into this new year. And one of the things that Blaine and I are working on in this new year is growing our company and our offerings of what we can do to support other people on the path to healing through energy work. And we are doing that together. And it makes it so much easier and so much more powerful. It is truly the essence of yin and yang, is these oppositional forces that are in constant relationship and communication that bring forth something greater. And in the middle of the yin and the yang is the joy, what we call in our tradition, the radiant circuit energy. The joy is kind of that glue isn't the right word, but the lubrication really of these disparate forces is is joy, is healing, is this childlike wonder at this entire incredible universe that we're all a part of. So, so thank you for that, Blaine. Thank you for everybody that is tuning in and listening. And you are part of the field with us. And this is again the interaction of energy. We wouldn't be here without you. And so we've really appreciated so much your tuning in to help us understand energy better and share that out with you. It's been so much fun starting this podcast. And I'm really glad, Blaine, that you are my partner on this podcast. It has just been a joy. And thanks everyone for listening. And Blaine, you end. What are your last thoughts before this year turns again?
Back at you, Lauren. I'm so grateful that we get to do this together. It's super exciting and fun. I had been looking for a podcast partner for a long time, and you were right in front of my nose, and we finally figured it out. So happy New Year to all of the listeners if you're listening to this at the time it comes out, or happy rest of your day if you're listening to this sometime in the future, and we will catch you next year.
Peace, everybody.